This is from Matthew 5, verse 13. Ready?
You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot.
Thank you, Brianna and Ian. So Jesus says, you are the salt of the earth. You are the salt of the earth. What does that mean? What does salt do? You and I have benefited from salt already today in ways beyond what quickly comes to mind, beyond what you are aware of. I'm pretty sure. I, like Brianna, was doing some research on salt. Salt is used in the making of soap, in the making of plastics, leather, clothes, pottery, rubber, paper, glass, pharmaceuticals. In fact, more than half of the synthetic products that we use involve salt in some stage as they are being made. Salt affects more things, impacts more things than what we realize. In Jesus' day, they were so aware of its value that sometimes they called salt white gold. As a matter of fact, Roman soldiers and others were often paid a sack of salt as wages. The word salary actually comes from the Latin word for salt, salarium. So, it's pretty significant that when Jesus, speaking to his disciples, he said, you are the salt of the earth. I missed that one. Because when he said that, he was talking to a handful of uneducated young men. Some of them had been fishermen, one had been a tax collector, one a political revolutionary. And Jesus is telling them, you are salt of the earth. You are going to impact things. The world will be affected by you. That little group have a global impact somehow. And then we remember that little group did go on to change the world. This little band did end up radically affecting the whole earth. Sometimes more than the earth wanted. As this salt was poured into the world, it was almost amusing to see the Pharisees, Herod, Roman emperors, countless scholars and philosophers trying furiously to get it back into the salt shaker. Jesus is still looking at his disciples, looking at those who follow him, and saying, you are the salt of the earth. When Jesus called his disciples that, when he calls us that, what qualities of salt are in his mind? Well, probably the first thing that we think of is that salt made our breakfast taste better this morning. If you had breakfast, if you didn't just have a cup of coffee, does anybody put salt in that? Everything is bland without salt. Salt enhances flavor. It enhances what is already there, you might say. Salt seasons. And Jesus, of course, knew that aspect of salt. And so perhaps when he says, "You are salt," he's thinking of his followers as spreading out into the world, enhancing the good that God has already placed there. Sort of drawing out some of the blessings of the good that God has already placed there in the earth. But though that's the first thing that comes to our minds, and that's what was in the verse about salt in the song that we just sang, that probably was not the main thing that was in Jesus' mind. Salt, in Jesus' day, like our day, made food savory, but its main use was as a preservative. There was no refrigeration in Jesus' day. What would it be like without refrigerators to preserve our food? In Israel, the temperature is over 90 degrees for more than half the year. So how could they take fish caught in the Sea of Galilee down to Jerusalem, a 2 days journey, without... Did you ever smell rotten fish? Or did you ever think, I have to eat fish, rotten fish, if I'm going to get some meat? The only way that they could do that was through the preservative of their day, and that was to rub salt on the fish before transporting it to market. I'm told that if a surface is at least 20% salt, that salt will suck the moisture out of any mold cells or bad microbes that come into contact with it. So those microbes will die rather than cause spoilage. As we depend on the advantages of refrigeration, so in Jesus' day, they depended on salt's preserving qualities. And that made salt indispensable in their world. So when Jesus says, "You are the salt of the earth," perhaps the thing foremost in his mind might have been that salt preserves. You are indispensable. The world and all its inhabitants are in a continual state of perishing. The world around us can't stop itself from going bad. But you can. You are the salt of the earth. There was yet a third aspect of salt that Jesus and his hearers were aware of. This was another main use of salt in that day. I read an article in Christianity Today, which is very top-notch. I'm sure that their researchers checked out this article before they published it. And they very clearly point out, particularly since Jesus was saying the salt of the earth, that Jesus very well might have had a main thing in his mind, that salt fertilizes. Ancient agricultural literature abounds in references to the value of salt in small quantities as a fertilizer for the soil. Now, we're sort of puzzled by this because we usually think of salt as our modern table salt, sodium chloride. But there's many kinds of salts. There's salts that are mixtures of magnesium chloride and potassium chloride and gypsum and a bunch of other things. And if you know much about agriculture, you know that those are minerals that the earth needs. So when placed on the soil, rain and water would let those salts dissolve and permeate the soil, and they would release some of their minerals, as well as there's something about salt that chemically frees other minerals and nutrients in the soil. And so the deep-rooted plants would get nourished from that. And some of you know, you put salt on something. As I was growing up, we'd make homemade ice cream, and you always had, a salt mixture with the ice cubes to make them a lot colder. And Mother would have me dump that where she wanted to kill some weeds. Well, when you put salt in small quantities on the soil, the new weeds with just surface roots would be stunted by that salt, as well as the plants with the deep roots would eventually be fertilized by that. So this might have been in Jesus' mind too. He was seeing his followers as not only here to season things, bring out the good in things, or preserve things from decay, but also to go to the parts of the world that don't have as much life and love, so that we can encourage growth in those areas. As a fertilizer, we measure our value by the growth of the people around us. Wherever the world is not the way God in his goodness intended it to be, Jesus envisions us as his followers going there and finding opportunities to be salt, to bring out the good, to stop things from going bad, to help there to be good growth. I want to now, for most of the rest of the time, just give one particular extended, multifaceted example of us as Jesus' followers going out into the world as salt. I think there's one particular thing that makes human relationships and human society, the world, go bad, that keeps our relationships from growing and flourishing. And it's this instinct, me first. Self-centeredness is bound up in the heart of all of us humans. We don't have to teach children to think about themselves, me first. We're born saying me first. What we learn is to hide us thinking me first. And that's a cancer, destroying relationships. In marriage, if both are saying you first, that is a great relationship. That is fun. When you have two people sort of trying to outdo each other in doing good and loving. But if one, or especially if both, have me first as their modus operandi, that marriage struggles, and each year gets harder. So what can restrain this me first natural instinct that we all have? Well, one option is we can find some leader or some group and devote our life to them. Just the mere fact of doing that moves our center of gravity away from self. takes away some of our self-centeredness. But what if that leader that we're devoting ourselves to is saying me first? Or what if the group that we are joining is basically saying us first, and they're prejudiced about every other group? Then if we join such a leader, such a group, we just basically give their self-focus more manpower, make them more powerful, let their selfishness be more destructive. The only way to fight me first, the only way to bring out the good flavor of our marriages and our friendships, the way to preserve relationships, the way to help the world grow in goodness, is to devote ourselves to someone who says you first, through and through. Now we're no longer self-focused, but we're focused on them, and they are also saying you first. And that is Jesus. And that is the reason the little band of disciples and our little band here can be the salt of the earth, because we are following Jesus. Jesus was not the only one who realized the value of you first. All great moral teachers have realized this, and all of them would teach some version of the golden rule, teach us to love our neighbor. But only Jesus thoroughly taught it. Jesus even extended this you first attitude to the relationships where the world really needs love. Love of enemy. Further, Jesus not only instructs us in restraining our me first, but he models restraining it. When his enemies came to kill him, he still modeled it. Modeled you first. He didn't call for the legions of angels to come and destroy his enemies, but rather he prayed for them. Father, forgive them. And even more glorious, as we follow Jesus, the love that we receive from him, the salvation that he gives, as we realize that he loves us so much that he gave himself for us, and that he didn't just die for us, but that he rose again from the dead and is preparing a place for us there with him on the other side of death. That salvation is so sweeping and so secure that it makes our self-centeredness unnecessary. Our life is now safe. The one we devote ourselves to cares for us so deeply and is so powerful, so strong, powerful enough to protect us. Jesus not only thoroughly taught you first, not only modeled it, but he makes it so that we don't need to say me first. We can say you first safely. We can practice self-renunciation without saying I don't matter. Because with Jesus, it's very clear we are safe, we are valued now and forevermore. So all those things, as we follow Jesus, can knock our me first tendency on its heels. Now note, I didn't say all those things make us cured of our self-centeredness. A relationship with Jesus will make us better, will knock me first on its heels, but it's still there. We can still go back and forth between the new self and the old self. There's still way too much in us that is self-centeredness. We often only have moments of you first. We need healing sometimes of old patterns and wounds from childhood that hook us and keep us from the mature response that we want. There is still way too much me first in the Christian church. But the fact is that we who follow Jesus, we have all experienced a death blow to the me first instinct. So even though we're still quite capable of switching to me first, the Christian church now has more ability to salt the earth than any other group. But we have salted the earth. It was in countries where the church was strong that the elimination of slavery first took place. First, it happened starting around the 10th century. Country after country of the Holy Roman Empire in Europe outlawed slavery. And then slavery cropped up again in the New World, but in the 19th century, it was abolished throughout the British Empire and then here in America. And the abolitionists were virtually all of them propelled by their Christian faith. Christian churches established the first hospitals. Christians have always been at the forefront of helping the poor. Christians are at the forefront of peacemaking, championing forgiveness, championing reconciliation. There are more churches that cross class barriers, racial barriers, national barriers than any other social group. So Jesus says, you are salt of the earth. You are ones keeping things from going bad, helping things go good. And you are that way because you are my disciple, Jesus says. We follow Jesus and we receive the biggest, most powerful boost toward you first. We as a church may be few in number, but the proportion of salt to what it's mixed with is usually small. We make a difference. So let's follow Jesus and then be salt. The last part of our text, Matthew 5:13, Jesus warns that salt must retain its saltiness, or, as one translation ends the verse, it's only good for filling up mud puddles in the road. We can lose our saltiness. A disciple can cease to be a disciple only as we are living for Jesus rather than living for self or for some other selfish leader or selfish group. Are we exercising this influence? Jesus is saying to all of us who have chosen to follow him, I believe in you. You are salt. You can make a difference in our world. You have an opportunity like nobody else to flavor things, to preserve, to help things grow. Don't lose that saltiness. Continue to stick close to me, to follow me, to immerse yourself in my words, to fill your soul, your spirit with prayer, with praise, shifting your center of gravity from self to me. Continue to follow me. Have an impact in this world. Help the world on the path toward peace and wholeness and the joy that God intends for everyone in his love for the whole world.